there's something deeply counterintuitive, almost shocking, about what I'm going to share with you. Because for decades, we've been told these things are essential. We've been sold the idea that more is better, that taking your daily multivitamin is a simple act of self-care, a kind of insurance policy against aging. But here's the truth. Supported by emerging data from high-quality, peer-reviewed clinical studies, there are 3 vitamins that, if taken past the age of 60, could actually harm your health. Not help it, harm it. These aren't obscure or fringe supplements. These are commonly recommended by well-meaning doctors and health influencers. And yet, in the aging brain and body, their effects change dramatically, potentially increasing the risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive decline. Let's unpack why. The first is vitamin E. Now, this may surprise many because vitamin E is often marketed as a powerful antioxidant. And in young populations, it does have protective effects at the cellular level. But in adults over 60, especially at high doses, meaning over 400 U daily, vitamin E has been correlated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality. That's right, mortality. Why? It has to do with how antioxidants interact with reactive oxygen species, or ROS. In the aging body, we actually need some of these ROS for essential signaling processes. Blunting them with excess antioxidants like vitamin E can impair immune function and cellular repair. Clinical trials, including data from the SELECT trial, have shown a link between vitamin E supplementation and increased risk of prostate cancer and hemorrhagic stroke. So while a small amount from diet is fine, supplementing it, think twice. The second one is vitamin A, especially in its performed state known as retinol. Past a certain age, the liver becomes less efficient at processing excess fat-soluble vitamins. Unlike water-soluble vitamins, which the body can flush out, vitamin A accumulates in tissues. High levels have been associated with bone density loss and an increased risk of hip fractures in seniors. That's because vitamin A in excess antagonizes vitamin D and disrupts calcium metabolism. In simple terms, too much vitamin A weakens bones. The irony, many seniors take it to support vision and immune health, without realizing they might be undermining their skeletal integrity in the process. The third, perhaps the most unexpected, is vitamin B6. When taken in high doses, B6 is essential. Yes, it's involved in over 100 enzymatic reactions in the body. But past age 60, the body becomes more sensitive to its effects. Doses above 100 mg daily, often found in energy, supplements, or mega B complexes, have been shown to cause nerve toxicity at Stanford. That's right, the very nutrient you might be taking to preserve nerve function can actually damage it. Seniors in particular are at risk for developing sensory neuropathy, tingling, numbness, even motor coordination issues from B6 overload. And here's the kicker, it's a cumulative effect. People don't feel it right away. It builds quietly over months, sometimes years. What we're really talking about here is not fear. It's awareness. Precision. This is about understanding that the aging brain and body are not simply older versions of our younger selves. They are different systems. They metabolize differently. They signal differently. They respond differently to stimuli, including nutrients. In neuroscience, we often talk about adaptation. The nervous system is always calibrating, seeking homeostasis. Supplements can help or hinder that process depending on timing, dosage, and age. After 60, the goal isn't to overload the system. It's to support it with exactly what it needs, nothing more. So the next time you reach for a supplement bottle, especially if it's one of these 3, pause, think. Ask ye, is this supporting the system I have today or the one I had 20 years ago? Because health after 60 is no longer about more. It's about better, more targeted, more informed. And yes, sometimes that means doing less, but doing it far more intelligently. Let me tell you something that cuts against almost everything we've been taught about wellness. The notion that more is better when it comes to vitamins, especially in later life, is not just misleading. It's biologically inaccurate. See, there's a deeply embedded idea in health culturing that taking extra vitamins is a kind of nutritional safety net, that if we just keep piling on the supplements, we'll somehow stay ahead of the aging curve. But that idea collapses under the weight of real mechanistic biology. Here's what's actually happening. The body doesn't work on a linear scale where more input always yields more output. It works on a curve, a biphasic dose response curve, and past a certain threshold, more of a substance. Even something as seemingly benign as a vitamin can shift from being supportive to being toxic. This is especially true in the context of aging, because once you pass 60, your liver slows down. Your kidneys become less efficient at filtration. your cells don't absorb and metabolize compounds with the same fidelity. And suddenly those extra doses that once gave you a slight edge begin to overwhelm your system. Neuroscience has a term for this kind of tipping pointing allostatic overload, where the stress of maintaining internal balance becomes a burden in and of itself. And when you consistently flood the body with excessive nutrients, that's what you create, not resilience, not longevity. A form of internal stress, subtle at first, but cumulative and often irreversible. So the core principle here is not just about taking fewer vitamins. It's about respecting the dose-response relationship, understanding that the physiology of a 60-year-old is not just a slowed-down version of their 30-year-old self. It's a fundamentally different terrain. It has new rules. And if we want to optimize for clarity, energy, and long-term health, we have to stop defaulting to more and start asking what is actually needed here. That shift from volume to precision is where real longevity begins. Take vitamin E, for example. For years, it was hailed as a miracle antioxidant, something that could neutralize free radicals, slow aging, even prevent cancer. And in young, healthy individuals at modest levels, there's some validity to that. But in people over 60, the equation changes dramatically. And this isn't theoretical. It's backed by rigorous clinical data, including large-scale trials like the Salatite study, which found that high doses of vitamin E, specifically those above 400 IU per day, were associated with increased risk of prostate cancer and a higher rate of hemorrhagic stroke. Let's dig into why. Inside the body, antioxidants like vitamin E interact with rehab oxygen species, or ROS. Now, ROS often get a bad rap because they're associated with oxidative stress. But here's the nuance most people miss. ROS aren't just byproducts of damage. They're crucial signaling molecules. The immune system uses them to kill pathogens. Cells use them to trigger repair responses. In an aging system, and where cellular signaling is already less efficient, blunting ROS too aggressively with high-dose antioxidants can actually impair critical defense mechanisms. You're not helping the system. You're muting the very signals it needs to adapt and respond. From a neurological standpoint, this is even more concerning because the aging brain is in a constant state of low-grade inflammation, a process that requires fine-tuned oxidative signaling to manage. Excess vitamin E throws a wrench into that system. It dulls the sharpness of cellular response. And over time, this suppression creates vulnerabilities, increased susceptibility to infections, impaired repair of vascular tissue, and the very real possibility of accelerating neurodegeneration. So while the marketing says protect your cells, the biology says something very different. Especially after 60, this isn't about stopping oxidation. It's about supporting regulated, healthy signaling. And that means respecting the threshold where vitamin E stops being a helper and starts becoming a hazard. Reactive oxygen species. ROS are often misunderstood. Most people hear the term and immediately associate it with damage with aging, with oxidative stress. And yes, in excess, ROS can be harmful. But that's not the whole story. What the science clearly shows, and what's often left out of mainstream health conversations, is that ROS are essential for healthy cellular function, especially in the aging body. They're not just byproducts of metabolic stress, they're measures. They signal the need for adaptation, repair, immune defense, and even neuroplasticity. Now, here's the issue. When you flood your system with high doses of antioxidants, like vitamin E or others, you're not just neutralizing bad guys. You're interfering with this signaling network. Think of it like silencing the fire alarm because you're afraid of the noise. You're not stopping the fire. You're just disabling the warning system. In younger adults, the body can often compensate for that blunting. But once you cross 60, compensation becomes harder. Mitochondrial efficiency droops. Immune surveillance becomes slower, and ROS, in carefully modulated amounts, actually help maintain homeostasis. They tell your immune system to stay vigilant. They activate genes involved in cellular cleanup, what we call autophagy. They even play a role in regulating synaptic plasticity in the brain, which is crucial for memory learning and cognitive resilience. So when seniors take excessive antioxidants, and Reese Rolls at Stanford, thinking they're protecting themselves from aging, they may be doing the opposite. They're disrupting a native defense and repair mechanism. They're turning down the volume on the system's ability to self-correct. That's not anti-aging. That's system interference. The key takeaway is this in the brain, in the immune system, in the cardiovascular system. Oxidative signals are not inherently bad. In fact, they're necessary. And when we suppress them indiscriminately, especially with megadoses of supplemental antioxidants, we're working against the very biology that keeps us resilient as we age. Now let's talk about vitamin A, specifically in its performed version known as retinol. It's found in many supplements at Stanford, often bundled under the umbrella of immune support or vision health, which sounds appealing, especially as we get older. But here's where we have to pause and ask, what happens to this vitamin in an aging body? The answer is critical, because unlike water-soluble vitamins that get flushed out, vitamin A is fat-soluble. That means it gets stored, primarily in the liver. And over time, it can build up to levels that are not just unhelpful, but toxic. And the liver, particularly in individuals over 60, becomes less efficient at metabolizing and clearing out these stored compounds. So what might seem like a safe, even modest daily dose begins to accumulate quietly. And with that accumulation comes very real consequences. One of the most serious being reduced bone density. Research has shown that high levels of retinol can stimulate osteoclast activity, the very cells that break down bone tissue. That's right. Vitamin A, the supplement you might be taking for your eyes or your skin, could be actively weakening your skeletal structure from the inside out. The data is striking. Elevated intake of performed vitamin A has been consistently linked to a higher risk of hip fractures in older adults. And the mechanism makes sense. High vitamin A antagonizes vitamin D, which, as we know, is essential for calcium absorption and bone maintenance. When vitamin A levels rise too high, it disrupts this delicate hormonal and mineral balance. The bones lose density, and the structural integrity that protects you from falls and fractures begins to erode. Slowly, invisibly. And that's inferred until one day it's not invisible anymore. And here's where it gets even more concerning. You don't need megadoses to create this problem. Seniors often already consume vitamin A from their diet, dairy, liver, fortified cereals. And a daily supplement on top of that, and you're crossing the threshold without even realizing it. No warning signs, no immediate symptoms, just a gradual undermining of one of the most crucial systems you rely on for independence and mobility. This is why understanding dosage, bioavailability, and age-related changes in metabolism isn't just academic. It's protective. And in the case of vitamin A, it could mean the difference between maintaining your physical freedom or losing it. Another layer to the vitamin A issue, one that's rarely discussed but absolutely essential, is its interaction with other key nutrients, particularly vitamin D. These two fat-soluble vitamins don't just coexist in the body, they influence each other's function in powerful, often opposing ways. And after age 60, that interplay becomes even more consequential. Here's what the science tells you: high levels of performed vitamin A can antagonize the effects of vitamin D. That means it interferes with the signaling pathways that vitamin D relies on to do its job, regulating calcium absorption, maintaining bone density, and modulating immune function. And that's a huge problem, because by the time we reach our 60s and beyond, many people are already deficient or borderline deficient in vitamin D to begin with. Whether due to less time outdoors, reduced skin synthesis, or decreased dietary intake, vitamin status typically drops with age. It's not a rare problem. It's the norm. Now add to that a steady intake of high-dose vitamin A through supplements, fortified foods, maybe even cod liver oil, and you've created the perfect biochemical collision. The vitamin A doesn't just sit quietly. It actively disrupts the vitamin D, binds to its receptors, and carries out its biological effects. So even if you're taking in enough vitamin D or supplementing it, its effectiveness is blunted by the competing presence of excess vitamin A. The end result: impaired calcium metabolism. The bones aren't properly mineralized. The structure weakens. And while this might not be something you feel on day one, over time, the degradation is real. You're more vulnerable to osteopenia, osteoporosis, and fractures, all of which can dramatically alter quality of life in later years. This is a perfect example of how well-meaning supplement choices can create nutrient imbalances where one helpful input cancels out another, and it reinforces a deeper truth in human biology: and context is everything. The impact of a nutrient isn't static. It depends on age, on dosage, on what else is happening in the system. And for seniors, especially those over 60, getting this balance wrong can have cascading effects. What starts as a small biochemical conflict can turn into a real-world mobility crisis. Now let's take a close look at vitamin B6, because this one is particularly deceptive. B6 is a water-soluble vitamin, which means most people assume it's inherently safe. If I take too much, I'll just pee it out, right? That's the common belief. And while that's partly true at low to moderate doses, once you cross a certain threshold, especially in the context of an aging nervous system, B6 doesn't just pass through. It begins to accumulate in tissues, and the effects can be surprisingly toxic. What's striking about B6 toxicity is how subtle it is at first. There's no dramatic reaction, no immediate red flag. Instead, the excess begins to target your nervous system quietly, gradually. We've seen this clearly in the clinical literature. Doses above 100 milligrams per day, which are commonly found in high-potency B complex supplements and so-called energy boosters, have been linked to sensory neuropathy, tingling in the hands and feet, numbness, loss of fine motor control, in more severe cases, even difficulty walking. And what makes this especially concerning is that for people over 60, these symptoms can be mistaken for normal aging or other neurodegenerative conditions, delaying accurate diagnosis. From a neurobiological perspective, here's what's likely happening. B6 in high concentrations interferes with the function of dorsal root ganglia, clusters of neurons that transmit sensory signals to the brain. And when those neurons are overstimulated or damaged by chronic exposure to high levels of B6, the communication pathways start to break down. And once that happens, the recovery isn't always guaranteed. Some forms of B6-induced neuropathy are irreversible, especially if the excess has been going on for months or years. Now layer on the fact that many older adults are already dealing with changes in nerve conduction due to age, diabetes, or even mild cognitive decline, and you begin to see the compounding effect. The nervous system at this stage of life is less resilient, more vulnerable to disruption. And unlike in younger individuals, where toxicity might be corrected with cessation, in older adults, the damage can stick. And again, this isn't about mega doses taken in error. It's about the routine, daily intake of advanced multivitamins or B complex blends marketed for stress, energy, or brain health. It's about doing something every single day that feels health forward, but maybe setting you up for long-term dysfunction. So the narrative that water-soluble vitamins are always safe, it's incomplete, because dose duration and age-dependent vulnerability matter a lot. One of the most important principles we need to internalize, especially when it comes to health after 60, is that the body at this stage is fundamentally different. It's not just a slower version of its younger self. It's a restructured system with altered priorities, different sensitivities, and reduced adaptive capacity. The enzymes that once processed nutrients quickly and efficiently now work more slowly. Mitochondria produce less energy, hormonal signaling shifts, and most critically, the way the body responds to supplementation changes, sometimes drastically. So when we talk about taking vitamins or supplements after 60, the conversation can't be framed around what was good for us at 30 or 40. That's outdated thinking. What you could tolerate or even benefit from in midlife might now introduce stress into the system. This is what we call a shift in biological context, and it requires a completely different approach to optimization. Take any nutrient, vitamin E, A, B6. In a younger body, the cellular environment is more robust. There's greater metabolic flexibility. Systems bounce back faster. But in a senior physiology, there's less margin for error. Small imbalances can have large ripple effects. What used to be an extra dose for protection can now tip the system into dysfunction. And here's where it gets even more nuanced. The threshold for toxicity drops while the body's signaling mechanisms become more fragile. That means you might not even feel the negative effects right away. But at a cellular level, disruption is already occurring. This is exactly why precision becomes more important than volume. In neuroscience, we understand that plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, is still present in older adults, but it has to be guided with care. You can't flood the system and expect the same adaptive results you got in your 20s or 30s. The same applies to nutrients. It's not about megadoses or blanket prevention strategies anymore. It's about strategic support, giving the system exactly what it needs in forms it can process, at levels it can tolerate. That shift from a performance mindset to a regulatory mindset is critical. You're no longer trying to push your physiology harder. You're trying to stabilize it to protect its ability to function smoothly with minimal interference. And that means being far more intentional, far more selective, and far more attuned to the biology you're working with now, not the one you remember from a decade ago. This is where we have to confront one of the most overlooked truths in aging and supplementation. Your biology doesn't care what worked for you in the past. It only responds to what it needs right now. And that means the strategies that were effective or at least tolerated. When you were younger may now be not just ineffective, but counterproductive. The notion that health routines are timeless is appealing, but the reality is far more dynamic. Once you reach your 60s, your physiology operates in a completely different state space. Hormone levels shift, testosterone, estrogen, growth hormone all decline. Enzymatic efficiency drops. Your gut doesn't absorb nutrients the same way. The blood-brain barrier becomes more permeable. All of these changes affect how your body interacts with the supplements you take. What was once a benefit may now be a stressor. What was once inert may now become biologically active in unintended ways. Let's put it in neurobiological terms. The brain's capacity to maintain homeostasis, that is, internal balance, relies on a precise tuning of inputs and outputs. Too much of the wrong input can skew that balance. And supplements, while well-intentioned, are inputs. They don't exist in isolation. They interact with hormonal systems, neurotransmitter pathways, immune signaling. So if you're taking a supplement based on a model of your past physiology, you're introducing a mismatch between what the system needs and what it's being given. And the cost of that mismatch is dysregulation, subtle at first, but often cumulative and difficult to reverse. What's more, we now understand that nutritional needs become more individualized with age. The concept of broad spectrum prevention doesn't scale into later life. It actually becomes a risk. That multivitamin with 2,000% of your daily vitamin A or 500% of your vitamin B6. It might have been fine at 35. At 65, it could be compromising your nerve health, your bone density, even your cognitive function. And that's not hypothetical. It's based on peer-reviewed evidence. So the takeaway is this: after 60, your supplement regimen has to reflect your current biology, not your past habits. You're not optimizing for the same outputs anymore. You're optimizing for stability, for clarity, for resilience. And all of that requires a recalibration. You have to respect that your system is no longer operating with the same rules, and your inputs need to evolve accordingly. One of the most insidious dangers of over-supplementing after 60 is the cumulative toxicity that builds up over time. It's not something you feel immediately. It's not a sharp pain or a noticeable change. It's subtle. It's incremental. But over the years, all those extra vitamins, those extra doses of antioxidants, Stanford, those well-meaning attempts to stay ahead of aging, they don't just vanish. They accumulate in your tissues, in your liver, in your fat cells, in your bones. And the real problem here is that the body's ability to detoxify itself naturally diminishes as we age. The liver, kidneys, and other detox organs slow down. They don't process or filter out excess nutrients the way they did in your 30s and 40s. This isn't just about overload. It's about the gradual, chronic impact of small amounts of toxic substances slowly disrupting cellular function over time. And when it comes to vitamins, this isn't a quick fix situation. You won't notice the damage at first. There's no immediate feedback loop to tell you that something's gone wrong. But in a way, that's the danger at Stanford, because toxicity doesn't always show up in the lab tests or in any immediate symptoms until the damage is already done. Let's take vitamin E as an example again, one that's widely touted for its antioxidant benefits. At modest levels, vitamin E does play a protective role, but high doses can accumulate, and research shows that excess vitamin E has been associated with hemorrhagic stroke and even higher cancer risks. This isn't something that happens overnight, but over time, the continuous bombardment of the system with too many antioxidants actually starts to interfere with cellular signaling, something that's absolutely crucial for repair, for defense, for immune surveillance. You could be setting the stage for a cascade of issues that only emerge years later. And it's not just vitamin E. It's a lot of supplements we take regularly without considering the long-term effects. A year of extra vitamin A, B6, or even high doses of vitamin C or D can accumulate that aren't immediately reversible. The body stores fat-soluble vitamins, and after decades of chronic supplementation, the cumulative toxicity can start to interfere with everything from cellular function to immune response to nervous system health. And the scariest part is that by the time you feel the effects, it's often too late to reverse the damage completely. In a way, this is a form of silent sabotage. At Stanford, you're adding more fuel to the fire, but instead of enhancing your biological processes, you're throwing the system off balance. The body becomes less adept at clearing out excess as we age, and that's the tipping point where small doses of toxicity can begin to spiral into something far more damaging, because we don't have the same built-in protective systems we had when we were younger. That's why the idea of more is better isn't just misguided when it comes to supplementation. It's dangerously short-sighted. The long-term impact of cumulative toxicity is something that often flies under the radar until it's too late. And the key to aging well, to aging with health and vitality, isn't about flooding your system with as many nutrients as possible. It's about precision, about giving your body exactly what it needs at the right time, in the right amounts, without overwhelming its ability to process and utilize those nutrients effectively. There's one final aspect of supplementation that we can't ignore, especially as we age: the brain's evolving nutrient requirements. After 60, the brain is already facing an uphill battle. Cognitive decline doesn't happen overnight, but it is a slow, insidious process that can be accelerated or mitigated by the choices we make about what we put into our bodies. Supplements, often touted for their ability to support brain function, are a double-edged sword. Many of us turn to them in an attempt to boost cognition, stave off memory loss, or prevent neurodegeneration. But here's the crucial point: the brain is highly selective about what it takes in, and it's more sensitive to excess than we realize. Let's take something like omega-3 fatty acids, for example. Omega-3s are essential for brain health. They play a critical role in maintaining neuronal membranes, modulating inflammation, and supporting cognitive function. But just like with anything else, too much of a good thing can be problematic. When omega-3 levels become excessive, they don't just float around helping to build brain tissue. They start to alter brain signaling, and in excess, they can contribute to bleeding risks, especially for older individuals who may already be on blood thinners or those who have undiagnosed vascular issues. The brain becomes more vulnerable to disruption rather than more resilient. This idea of balance over abundance extends to other commonly used supplements like B vitamins or antioxidants. In a brain that's already dealing with oxidative stress and reduced metabolic function, the introduction of excess antioxidants like vitamin C or E can interfere with natural oxidative signaling. Instead of helping, these supplements dampen the brain's natural adaptive responses, which are necessary for neuroplasticity and repair. It's a dangerous paradox rolls at Stanford. You might think you're doing your brain a favor by taking more, but in reality, you're preventing it from responding and adapting in the most efficient way possible. And the issue isn't limited to antioxidants or fatty acids. Many seniors are taking multivitamins or herbal supplements designed for memory support, things like ginkgo biloba, ginseng, or Bacopa monnieri. While these can provide cognitive benefits at moderate levels, they can also interfere with neurotransmitter balance or blood flow to the brain when overused. Stanford, just because a supplement is marketing good for the brain doesn't mean it's universally beneficial, especially over time. The brain needs precision. It doesn't need to be bombarded with everything that claims to be good for it. And again, the subtlety of it makes it even more dangerous. These effects don't show up immediately, but they compound over time, contributing to cognitive dysfunction, mental fog, and a decline in overall brain health. It's important to remember that the brain's ability to adapt, to form new connections, to heal itself, it's still there. But it requires clear signaling and appropriate support. Stanford. Too much of the wrong thing can create confusion in the brain's chemical landscape, making it more difficult to maintain focus, memory, and mental clarity. It's not about flooding the brain with nutrients. It's about creating the right environment for it to function optimally. And that's the key difference. As you age, supplementation should not be about throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. It's about being strategic, understanding the limitations of your current biology, and providing your brain with exactly what it needs, not just what seems like it could help. Ultimately, the point here is that supplementation after 60 should not be viewed through the lens of preventive medicine, as if more is always better. The complexity of the aging brain requires targeted interventions, a precision approach that works within the context of the brain's neurobiological reality. Instead of chasing the latest brain booster, it's time to take a step back, evaluate what is really necessary, and make adjustments to supplement your brain's specific needs, not overwhelm it.